Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by Natso. Now, here are your hosts, Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.
Hello, welcome to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. This is your host, Amy Toner, and I'm here with my co-host, Darren Schulte. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Amy.
Okay, you're listening to The Truck Stops Here, Natso's podcast. Today we are joined by Don Quinn, Natso's Vice President. Hi, Don.
Hello, Amy. Hello, Darren.
Hi, Don.
So Don and Darren do a lot of travel center consulting for the industry. They help our members and non-members grow their business. A lot of times that means going to the truck stop and doing an in-depth consultation, but it also means answering a lot of questions about the industry. Today we're going to talk about some of those operational questions that they get. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's start with
We are ready.
start with staffing. One question I know you guys get is, do travel centers in general pay more than convenience stores?
Amy, that's actually a really great question. Don and I recently were asked that question by one of our members, and it is something that frequently we get posed. What I would say in general, and Don can chime in here a lot because he has a lot more recent experience, is the competition in our industry is getting much more challenging. I'd say much more competitive. And it's the competition that in most cases is driving salaries. Depending where you are in the United States, if you're next to the oil fields or if you happen to be next to someone like a Buc-ee's as an example, you may find yourself having to pay $14, $15, $16 an hour to get a cashier versus, 30 years ago, that would have, obviously been unheard of. With that, I'll just ask Don to give some of his opinion on that as well.
Darren, I absolutely agree with you. It is a full-on war out there for employees. I did just a quick research, and currently the national unemployment rate is 3.5%, which is down from 3.9% a year ago. So, it's a significant drop, of the number of employees that are out there. And so you have to have a strategy, right, to go out and recruit and retain these people. And $11 an hour, my granddaughter was just hired for as an entry-level position at McDonald's in Omaha, Nebraska. And as you stated, if you're in certain areas, maybe next to a Walmart distribution center or where competition for those staff positions are really super high, that $15, $16 an hour starting wage is not unheard of at all. And obviously you have a lot of stuff to pay for staffing at $16, $17 an hour versus $11. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Recently, an article came out. I think Taco Bell was highlighting the fact that they're going to be looking at paying some of their store managers $100,000 a year. While that may seem, almost amazing or hard to believe in our industry, that's the type of thing that is right, wrong, or indifferent happening around our community. In that article, they referenced many of the QSRs are paying $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year for store managers. So lots of competition, Amy, when it comes to paying employees.
I know, I do a lot of interviews with Natso members, and they always talk about that, especially in remote areas. It's just so hard for them to find staff.
Yeah, and as Don said many times, which I often like when Don's visiting with members about the staffing needs, is the tough thing about staffing is, you can chase business away if you're not properly staffed. So when it comes to the fact that you're having to pay a lot of money for certain staff members, managers, whatever it may be, you may say, well, you know what, I've got to kind of run a lean staff. And as Don always points out is, if you run your staff too lean, you're going to run customers away, unfortunately, because nobody wants to wait in lines. Nobody wants dirty restrooms. Nobody wants to pull up to a fuel pump and have it filthy. So it's a real balancing act for our members out there.
Darren, I might add that the one area that probably differs from the convenience store primarily is the general manager position. A manager of a convenience store, as you kind of alluded to, is probably similar to the fast food general manager, that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 range. And I have found that the kind of the starting pay is at $60,000, $70,000, and many locations general managers can make upwards of $200,000 if it's a really prime hop-in location, if you will. So as far as the differences between convenience stores and travel centers, I think it's that upper management position, because of the additional responsibility, is really the big differentiator.
Yeah, Don, that's a great point, because it's not uncommon nowadays, as you and I know, driving up and down the interstate, to walk into a travel center. There's one in particular I can think about that actually posts their salary for their managers, and it's incredibly, it's an incredible amount. You know what I mean? You walk right into it. They not only tell you what they're paying their employees in big old signs, and they'll tell you, boom, this is what we're paying our store manager. And Don's spot on. It's 6 figures. So, which, again, for a lot of our single store operators, that sometimes is an eye-opening experience when they walk into one of those types of operations and see what folks are paying folks to work for them.
Speed of service is so important in this industry. How can you staff for speed?
I'll turn it over to Don. Don, how about you take off this one, and I'll chime in on this piece for you.
Yeah, Darren's really spent more time in this area than I have, Amy, but I guess I could just correlate this to my own personal experience. Nobody likes to stand in line. And if I have to stand in line too long, I'm probably going to get upset and potentially not stop back at that location again. So the reasoning behind it is just critical to your business. And how can you staff? I think it really look at your transactions on an hourly basis, and that's going to identify your busy times, and then you can staff according to your busy times. And you also need to take into consideration not just the transactions at the register, right, but typically in the evening, weekdays, your shower counts go way up. So you may need an additional staff person to handle the extra hour load. And so I'd say that, the other thing that I see sometimes is, we all like to take lunch hour, and sometimes lunch hours are very busy times for that hour and a half, 2 hours. And we got people eating lunch instead of being up on the counter taking care of customers. So that's another area that you might want to pay attention to. And with that, I'll turn it over to Darren.
Those are great points. I love the last one. You and I have talked about that before. It still shocks me today in this day and age. During some of our most busiest critical times, you'll go into travel centers and, again, you're like, where are the people? Like Don and I will be doing reviews and like, where's the staff? And they're like, well, they're having lunch.
Right.
It's like, wow, that's interesting. You have 2 people working your busiest period of time, and you have 5 people taking lunch. Or maybe they have a really busy dinner rush. It's after work. People are coming home. They're fueling up maybe for the weekend, whatever it may be. And Don and I will ask that question, where's the staff? Oh, they're having dinner. It's interesting.
I know, that happens at the NATSO show when I'm producing the keynotes or during the meals, and the AV team is always trying to get me to eat. I'm like, this is the time.
Exactly.
I will eat before and I will eat after, but I am not eating back here. I am focused on this.
That's a great point.
People get very rigid.
One of the things about speed that Don and I are always telling people is when you build a store in today's world, I think you have to really think about the design of that store, and is it built for speed? And the reason I often tell people that is, it's amazing when I'm talking to my grandson Nick, and when we're just talking about speed. I don't think I'm in particularly a person that is any more, has a bigger expectation than someone else my age about speed. But my grandson's understanding of speed is completely different than mine. Mm-hmm. He's growing up in a society where everything is immediate, right? He's so fortunate. So they tap their phone, something gets delivered. And when I'm talking to my younger nieces and nephews just about life in general, their version of what takes long is completely different different than mine. So they're saying things like, why does it take 2 days for me to get something from Amazon? Why can't I get it today? And I think if retailers today, and especially in the travel industry where we have government regulations and rules that are really crunching the time available for our core customer, the truck driver, if we're not aware of those types of things when it comes to speed, I think we're doing not only them a disservice, we're doing ourselves a disservice. And I think it ends up being, it impacts our business. There's some operators, as Don and I have alluded to in the past in blogs and articles and in some of the store visits, the new entries into our market are really, really good about speed. And they are really turning the tide in terms of drivers go in there, they get serviced immediately. Right. And that's becoming, I wouldn't say it's as important as the price of fuel, but for some of those drivers where time is really of the essence, they're beginning to look at things like that. Some place might be a couple of pennies cheaper. However, I can go to this one particular location, get in and out super easy. Yeah. Don's always talking about the importance of when you create a travel center, the exit and the entries, and then get in there. I fuel really fast. I get my food really fast. It's great food. It's fast. It's everything I need. And boom, I'm out of that operation in a very quick time. Time is really becoming money.
There's something about when someone is really slow, you feel like they don't respect you, Mm-hmm. Like if someone's fast and focused on you, then it's like a good feeling.
That's correct. Yeah. It's like when we all go to a restaurant, Don and I travel together, so we make that comment all the time. When you get serviced well, even if someone's really busy, but you see them hustling and they're servicing you well, you feel that that's a better meal than if you're just sitting there forever. It's the same steak you've had 10 times, exactly. But it sure tastes different when you get great service.
What do you guys think of, I know some of the newer models have just one transaction desk. What do you think about that?
I think it's that is, in my opinion, it's the way to go. Not only from a cost-saving experience, from a cost-saving standpoint, but I also think from a training, you can get more people trained. There's more, when you have the separated counter, it certainly serves a purpose, but it's kind of separated, and there's more costs associated with it. Training in particular, it might be harder to cross-train people. I'm just always been a big fan of the single counter.
How about you, Don?
Unless you're in a really high diesel volume location, absolutely the one single pay counter is the way to go. There are some members out there that are still doing two, but they're pumping 1.5 million gallons of diesel fuel a month and can really kind of justify it. So, but otherwise, the single pay counter is absolutely the way to go. Agree.
Is there anything else in staffing that you guys get frequently, or did we cover it?
Well, go ahead, Don, please.
I'm sorry, Darren.
No, please.
I guess going back, a couple thoughts came on employee pay and just the fact that it's an all-out war out there for staff. And there's some advantages that travel centers have that some of their competitors, if you will, for that staff don't have. And that might be something as simple as food discounts for staff, gas discounts for staff, maybe a free meal on their birthday.
Great points.
All those things add up, and so I wouldn't underestimate the power of offering those additional perks to your staff, because you're competing against some pretty savvy operators out there for the same employee, if you will. So just another thought.
Don, I think those are great points. You and I often know when we're talking to members, we often in our industry don't use the full capabilities of our properties. When the price of fuel was high, for example, we forget that for a lot of our employees, that could be the most expensive thing in their P&L in many ways, right? It's their own personal P&L. The fact they're having to pay $4 gas, for example. And, you have an advantage over a Cracker Barrel, which can't offer a gas discount for one of those employees. So I think Don's spot on. I think when you look at your business, when it comes to recruiting, in particular for staffing, look at the full capabilities of what you could potentially be offering employees. Think outside the box, because you do have some advantages, as Don referenced.
All right, we're going to shift gears and talk about some operational questions on the fuel island. How often should you clean pumps?
I'll leave that one up.
Never?
Never.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah, you just put a glove on and you never get your hands dirty. So you supply leather palm or brown jersey gloves at the pump, and you never have to worry about spending any labor in cleaning your
Just
pumps.
don't brush too closely to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly correct. Well, this is a good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. It's ironic because I recently purchased a diesel pickup, so I'm now pulling up at the diesel island, and of course, diesel is oily and it leaves a residue, and so I have some nitrile gloves in the back seat. I put one on before I pump my diesel fuel because the nozzles and everything tend to be dirtier than the gas for sure. But I think that you should at least wipe down your dispensers every day. And it doesn't take long. A mild kind of soapy solution of water and to kind of give it a once over, keep the dust off of them, et cetera, keep them looking presentable, if you will. I think, a deep cleaning based on kind of the volume of the location and how often it needs to be tended to. But I'd say that deep cleaning on diesel dispensers, maybe no less than once a month, and not just the dispensers, but also the islands. Nobody likes to step into a diesel spill or even drops and get back in their vehicle, and then you smell diesel fuel for the next, 2 or 3 days inside your vehicle. So I think that not enough attention is typically paid to that diesel forecourt, and anytime you spend out there for clean water buckets, et cetera, is going to pay dividends to you.
I agree with Don.
Darren,
Yeah, you're spot on. I always find it interesting. Like someone will, let's say they're doing, 300,000 gallons on the back on diesel, and you multiply that out by what the dollar of diesel is and generating X revenue, and maybe they're doing 200,000 gallons up front at $2, right? So it's $400,000 or so in revenue on the gasoline side, and it's over $1 million on the back side. But to Don's point, the car side, the pumps are cleaned regularly and often they look nicer. You go back to the diesel side and there's no attention, even though that backside is generating that type of revenue. Right. And as Don referenced, if you're out there cleaning your trash and picking up trash, it doesn't take a lot to clean, 8 pumps or 6 pumps or 4 pumps. It's kind of mind-numbing. You might have 20 or 30 pumps of gasoline. I'm a little bit of exaggeration, but let's say 12 to 18 gasoline pumps up front, and they're immaculate. And then you go to the backside and you have 4 and they're dirty, or 6 and they're dirty. So I think there's a great opportunity to spend a little bit of time. And as Don said, it doesn't have to be fancy. Just clean them and wipe them down daily.
Is there like a certain time of day usually people do that? I've never seen anyone cleaning a pump for all my truck stop visits.
I don't know. I would tell you that, again, create a schedule. As Don referenced, have a regular schedule.
Ooh, checklist.
Follow, do a deep cleaning, as he referenced, at least once a month where you're doing a deep cleaning. But that should be part of, I would think, the daily trash pickup you're out there picking up trash, clean the pumps. So I don't know, Don, do you think there's a specific time when they should wipe down the pumps? Any specific time? I wouldn't think there was any just to do a wipe down.
I wouldn't think so. I'd say that mid-mornings or early afternoons are typically a little bit slower times of the day, and it's also daylight hours, so your staff can be seen out there. I wouldn't want to be doing it at night, and I would encourage you to consider having your staff in a reflective vest so
Great point.
That are extra visible out there, not only for you to find them, but also for drivers. It's if they're out there amongst the islands, et cetera, that they would helpfully stand out a little bit. So.
I know you guys get a lot of questions from people that are remodeling or adding diesel pumps. So how many do you recommend, and the best width in between them?
Sure, I'll jump into that. I think one of the first things, especially if they've never done a feasibility study on their business, they can be expensive, and we know a lot of people shy away from that. But both Don and I are big believers is you really should have a true understanding, especially if you're going to build a travel center, do a feasibility study and really understand what is the potential volume of that location. And then if you do build, let's say you decide just to build 4, we're always telling people, well, maybe you should go ahead ahead and is, for lack of better words, plumb for another 6 or another 8. Prepare for maybe the fact that you might need some additional diesel bays. It's always much cheaper to do it at the beginning than to try to tear up concrete later down the road. So I'd say for that one, again, feasibility study, and then prepare for more. And then as the width goes, I think you need to be in anywhere from the 11 foot on the minimum to the 14 feet width on the high end. Certainly, if you have the ability to have some offset pumps so you can do wide load trucks and trailers, that's an opportunity to get some additional business if you have the land, the ability for those trucks to get in and out. But I'd say for me, width would be minimum 11, and that's short. That's probably tight. 14 feet is how I would go, anywhere from 11 to 14 feet as far as width goes.
But you, Don, any other things to add?
I agree absolutely with what Darren says. Start off with a feasibility study so you have an idea of how much diesel you're likely going to pump every month. And it's really uncanny how well they do in identifying what your volumes are going to be. As far as number of dispensers, they say in the auto industry, if you're doing 50,000 gallons per dispenser, that you're maxed out. And I'd say that on diesel fuel, 50,000 is kind of a low number. There's locations out there that are doing in excess of 100,000 gallons per dispenser per month, but those are very, very busy locations, and likely there's people waiting in line to get up to a diesel dispenser, which isn't all bad during the busy times. But just to kind of give you an idea of typically how many you would need, I'd say if you're estimating that 60,000, 70,000 gallons a month per, puts you in the neighborhood. I agree with Darren on I like the wider islands. Of course, that increases your costs. Of your canopy is going to be bigger than, and obviously more pavement, so your cost is going to be higher. But I think the 14-foot center to center is ideal. That gives you room for the driver to walk on each side of the truck while he's fueling, and maybe a little bit of room to maneuver the wash the windshield, etc. So 14 foot would be on kind of an optimal, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We're going to cover one more topic, which is talking about the products and turns at a truck stop. I know people ask you, probably you a lot, Darren, how many turns does a traditional truck stop have?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. That's another question, surprising. You've been doing good with the questions, because that's something we get frequently, and also something that just happened recently. And going back to kind of like the labor piece, it surprises me how everyone's kind of looking for a magic bullet. We get that on labor a lot, of what labor percent should I be using, example. And Don and I, again, always go through the process of, be careful about just choosing a number. Same kind of thing happens with turns, because every location is different. So, in traditionally a good travel center, if they've got a robust truck supply category, for example, they're often turning that product 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 times. However, there are cases where it turns less, but it's generating a lot of dollars. So when you're looking at building your travel center, I think it's important to understand that categories like truck supply, electronics, gifts, and novelties are traditionally going to have much lower turns than a cookie or a cracker or a Snickers bar. And they may have less gross margin return on inventory invested. However, they're often going to be generating a tremendous amount of gross margin dollars.
Right.
They're bringing a lot. So when you think about it, if you sell an item for $100, how many Snickers bars do you need to sell to create $100 in sales?
Right.
So I think that's really, really important. The one thing I would share with people is, and Don and I often say this, is it's more important to understand what your current turns are, understand what they are, document them, and then begin to work on improving them. Rather than trying to say, what does Love's have, or what does Pilot, or what does Quick Trip do, or what does this company do? We're always trying to teach people, what are your current turns? What are they? And start working on improving them. We also tell them, very similar, getting back to that labor piece, that same kind of comment, is try to try to get an understanding of what your numbers are and then work on improving them. Right. So I'm not trying to skip that question, but we're not going to see the same kind of beer turns in most cases as a convenience store will. But we might see a significantly higher turn ratio on sodas than a C-store might, just again using comparisons. So my statement is always learn your numbers, figure out what your numbers are, and then work on improving them.
Anything to add, Don?
Well, I absolutely agree with Darren. You first have to know where you're at, and there's disparity, if you will, on turns, right? Some people calculate turns at cost, and some people calculate turns at retail. And I think Darren's numbers, I'm sure he would confirm this, but I'm sure his numbers are based on cost, in turns at cost.
Correct.
And I have experienced the same. I think that 5, 6, 7 turns per year is kind of average, if you will. And it really depends on the mix of your categories. And first of all, you should be congratulated for looking at turns. A lot of operators don't even do that. And I'd encourage you to maybe look at your turns by category. And now all of a sudden you're going to get an even deeper understanding of your store. And as Darren shared with you, then start trying to improve those numbers from there. For an example, turns out of a cooler should be, at least 12, 14 turns per year, at least. And so maybe your cooler is what's pulling your overall numbers down. Maybe it's another category within your store. Cigarette turns should be very, very high. So I think that, cigarette cat turns should probably be, ideally around 20. And those are achievable numbers. So again, as Darren shared with you, understand what your numbers are to begin with. And congratulations for tackling that one, and then go to work on it. I totally agree.
Excellent.
All right. Thanks, guys. I think we have to cut it off here. So many great questions. You can find us online at thetruckstopshere.show. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the podcast, I hope you'll reach out to me at editor@natso.com. Thanks for listening.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by Natso, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by Natso in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.